smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.
Hi, beautiful people. So if you are watching me on the replay, thank you so much for watching me. I appreciate you. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I come on, I talk to people who are doing things to empower the lives of others by sharing their story. And the goal behind me coming on here is to just help people kind of shift the way they think. And I've been able to do that by people learning that they're not alone. And one of the things that I really enjoy doing is I really enjoy talking about relationships. I think relationships are complicated for numerous of reasons. And I think the more we're educated around it, I find that it doesn't feel so hard. And so in order to do that, I am going to bring on my special guest, and I'm going to have him introduce himself to you all. Hi, special guest.
Am I on? No. What's up, folks? It's Jeff.
Jeff, what are you? Who are you?
Who am I? What am I?
Yeah, what are you?
Jeff. I'm an executive coach and facilitator. I like to help people solve problems. So when Celeste told me that there was an opportunity for us to do so together on her show, I leapt at it, and here we are.
Yes, and I'm grateful. I got to say it all the time. I'm grateful that you said yes, because you could have said no, but you said yes. So I appreciate that.
I'm still considering
it. And so I think what we have a work relationship. How is this work relationship working out for you?
It's working out good, Celeste. What I like best is that all the infrastructure and all that is on you. So it's you're the one that's messing with StreamYard and all the various stuff, and I get to show up and just be your assistant.
My side piece. I like it.
Well, is your husband in the room? Yeah. You get to be a side. Rule number one about being a side dude: just play your position, and that's what I'm doing.
So one thing for people that are new to this show, and this is an audio podcast. That's where I started. The video started in March. So, hey, Miss P Love. So if you are watching me on video, this is a podcast you can find streaming on all podcasting platforms. So one of the things that I love about me and Jeff is that we kind of like talk about relationships and we're able to dissect them. But today, and you're more than welcome to ask any questions. I want to kind of go through some of the forms of relationships that people find themselves struggling in. And the first form I want to kind of talk about is like work relationships. And one of the things I was talking to Jeff about is that I say when it comes to work relationships, we have a relationship with our coworkers, or we may look at the relationship as it's with the corporation. Tell me what you think about that mindset that I have around the workplace relationship.
Well, that mindset, what do you mean that mindset?
So is it fair to say that when we go to our jobs, like if we're working for someone, we may have an established relationship with coworkers, or we may have an established relationship with the actual job placement. Like there's a possibility that I can enjoy my coworkers, but not like the company. Do you think that's fair?
It's possible, but in the end, usually you hear people say, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses, right? So the truth is a corporation is a shared fiction that doesn't really exist. What exists is all the people that are there and the decisions that they make, right? So you have a set of coworkers that you work with, and they are like that job to you. Like if you work let's say you work at Starbucks, you don't really like work at Starbucks. You work at this little satellite somewhere, and you got coworkers and the supervisor and the manager that makes the schedule. And that's what Starbucks is to you. Do you know what I mean? And if they suck, you'll spend the rest of your life thinking Starbucks sucks. But if you'd only worked at the one across the city, that one might have been great. So really, I think I put a lot of emphasis on people. People are like the only thing that's real. That's how I look at it.
Well, that's true, because you just happen to say Starbucks. Starbucks has a good reputation. Like, employees tend to like Starbucks, but maybe at specific Starbucks, people may find themselves struggling with the manager, because I do think that the way that jobs operate, it kind of starts from the top. Like, what's the leaders? What is the leader doing? Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, well, so there is such a thing as culture, which is, you can think about culture almost like a shared personality that gets and it definitely gets passed down. So an example is Comcast is usually rated as one of the worst companies, right? Because people hate, everyone don't. I mean, do you like Comcast, Celeste?
I don't like the prices.
Right. Nobody it's a monopoly. They have bad customer service, whatever. And so if you work for Comcast, their strategy is not to provide a good product, but to corner you into having to use them, which in Boston, for example, we are.
Yeah.
And so when you work at Comcast, the staff's whole job is to basically like just get you to stay, get you not to quit, right? So they get like abused all day. And so working at Comcast, even if you like your coworkers, that's an example of a place that has such a toxic strategy that it probably sucks to work there, even if you're working with your best friend. But both you and your best friend will just go home and say, yo, I fucking hate that place, man.
Right.
Because it's ugly. What you have to do all day is ugly. Or like working in a slaughterhouse or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't matter how much you like the people. Having to, use a pneumatic gun to kill, 1,000 cows a day probably wears on you. So there's
I hear you. And I think about like what you're saying about like the work culture, and it is kind of what it is. What I've noticed with people is that regardless of the culture, they will stay in. And one of the things about work is that it literally takes up so much of our time. And I think that when people are not happy with what they're doing or their workplace, they find themselves to be miserable in all other places. Do you think that's accurate?
I think that's perfectly stated. There's 168 hours in the week.
Yeah.
Right? You sleep for about, if you sleep in the right amount, you're sleeping for about 60 of those. So out of 100 hours, then 45 hours you're at work. That's half your life. You spend more time at work than you spend really engaging with your mate, usually. Right?
Yeah.
And so if it's a nightmare, you bring that's the most of what you do is a nightmare. Yeah. So people underestimate how much a toxic job, toxic work environment, toxic relationships at work will globally affect their life.
Good. And so one of the things I want to think about, and just for people's background, because I work for myself 100%. So like, I'm speaking from a privileged place now. I have not always worked for myself. I've always worked in nonprofit, and I've always not liked the culture of nonprofit. I feel like we put Band-Aids on things, and on paper it looks good, but the actuality, it doesn't work the way it is on paper. And so I just kind of want to share my strategy, and I want you to like kind of talk about like what that looks like. If you think, other ways, I'm just thinking about for people that are struggling. When I realized that I wasn't happy in nonprofit, I developed a plan to think about what I'm going to do to change that. And part of my plan was I'm going to work for myself. And at the time, I did not have my license to practice therapy. I just had a master's, and I had got really comfortable in my position and got demoted. And that demotion kind of told me I was disposable. Unfortunately, like, we don't need a demotion to tell us we're disposable. We are employees at will most of the times. But unfortunately, it takes something drastic to happen before we start to realize our worth at places. And that's one thing to think about. Like, if you're struggling, don't wait for somebody to like do something. Think about what your plan is. I wasn't proactive. Once I got demoted, that's when I decided to create a plan. So even though I stayed in a job placement that I did not enjoy, I was able to find enjoyment because I found myself planning for my future. Right. And I think that if I'm in a position where I am not happy and I don't have any alternatives, I don't have a plan, I will continue to stay miserable. So what do you think people can do if they're in a position that they are just completely not satisfied? They've kind of talked to their manager. It's more of a culture thing. The relationship just isn't working. Like, what is your thoughts about the way I decided to deal with it, and what would you like advise somebody?
Right. Well, the trap, it's one of those situations where now I can tell you look at that demotion as lucky, but it didn't feel lucky the day they told you you're demoted. Right, you've gone backwards. You don't even get to sit where you are. You're going in the other direction.
Wait, so I was a supervisor supervising case managers, and then I became a case manager. So not only was I demoted, I started to be a peer to who I was supervising,
right.
And lost $5,000. Like my
right.
pay got demoted as well, just for clarity.
Right. No, right, and I know at that time it's embarrassing. It's like a little bit, frankly, we know that's uncommon. That doesn't happen that much. So it's embarrassing. It felt unlucky, but in reality, it was the shock that catalyzed your change. And in that sense, it's fortunate. And I think that the truth is we have to learn, ideally, as a person, there's a curse, which is like the curse of the C- life. So if your life is just coasting by and you're like living a C- life, maybe a D+ life, unfortunately, that's passing, right? And so you'll just live with it and adjust and live with it and adjust. I don't like my job. I don't like the way I look. I don't like where I live. But I mean, it's okay. I'm making it. I'm not dead. Other people have it worse. And you just coast. And what oftentimes you'll hear people, Celestial story is not uncommon at all, that what happens is somebody has a big shock. Sometimes it's referred to as hitting rock bottom. That thing that happens that is so awful that it makes you sit up, take notice, and take stock and evaluate your life. So the secret is to look at your life. And if you really want to make moves, instead of saying, what can I tolerate? You say, what am I aiming for? Instead of saying C-, I can accept this. You say, is this why I get one life? Is this why I want to live? Is this what I want to be doing? If not, then change. You can have what's called a bias towards action. A bias towards action means, let's say you have two options, stay where you are or make a move. And you can't tell which is better. If it's a tie, make the change. Instead of if it's a tie, stay. Right? If you're at your job and there's another job across town and it you can't tell which one's better. That one pays a little more, but the hours are a little worse. If you can't tell, change. Not it only change when you see something that's obviously better. From where you're at, it's not clear what's better. But the more you change, the more you'll know. And you already know where you're standing right now. Didn't have that much opportunity, right? In your case, Celeste, you went in the other direction. But even if you hadn't, it wasn't like some, being managing the case managers wasn't so dope either. Right? It's not like that was a great job that you loved and then you got demoted.
It was. I low key. I loved it. I enjoyed what I was doing.
When you were supervising them, you loved it because you said when you started off saying you didn't like the nonprofit industrial complex.
So when I became a supervisor, I started to understand that it was a lot more complex. So the culture I didn't like. I actually liked the people I was working with. But you're right. I didn't like the culture.
Right. It's not like, again, you didn't get demoted from you were open. I'm just going to say, because you have this show that, you're Oprah and you had your own show and it was perfect and great and you were rich and everyone loved you. And then you got demoted. You got demoted from some shit that wasn't even your dream. You see what I'm saying? So like, it's like getting broken up with by somebody that you don't even like. Like, so what? Change. If you're not sure if you should stay with your mate, leave them. If you're not sure that sounds weird, but because when you know, you know. Do you know what I mean? So this is a way. Now, this is not as stable a life as sticking with things no matter what. But I'm talking about an instance where you're not sure if you should make a change or not. If you're not sure, then you might as well make that move. That's the bias towards action.
I like that. And it's speaking of like, if you don't like your mate, change. When I was in a relationship years ago, my boyfriend left me, and I realized I wasn't devastated. I had just finished high school, and I hope he's not watching.
He's watching. Terrence, You're mediocre. He's watching this. He was about to call you up and propose like this GameStop
No,
stuff.
I just
Realize I undervalued you.
Oh shit. I just finished high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I had joined the military because I was living in a small town, and the recruiters come to those schools and in Georgia. And he came with me to Boston. And then one day he was like, "I'm leaving." And I said, "Okay." But then after that, I enrolled in school, and I just keep thinking, like, I'm so glad he left me. And it's so interesting. Like, it's like when you mentioned that, I'm like, why did it take for him to leave for me to, the same way with the job? Like, it shouldn't take something drastic. I mean, luckily, I looked at it as, let me see what I'm going to do with my life. I don't think a lot of people think that way. If they're left, it could be like, what's wrong with me? Blah, blah, blah. But for me, I didn't feel anything. So, and I felt like I was able to move forward with my life, and whether it was the relationship I'm talking about or work. And it's probably part of my personality. It's like, I'm very determined. But it's something to think about, is that we don't have to wait for something drastic to change. One of the things I want to say too about your line of questioning is that I find that when we question our behaviors, it really helps break up something that allows us to think a little bit more clearer. I think a lot of times we just allow things to happen. We don't question them, and they become like this real thing. It becomes, this is what life is, instead of saying like, what am I aiming for? Right? Like, that's so good. That's such a good, it's a simple question, but a lot of times we just kind of stay stuck, you know?
Well, human beings, one of the reasons why bias towards action is powerful is because human beings do not have a bias towards action. Human beings have a strong bias towards accepting what I've already accepted. Very strong, right? So just as I know a woman who, she was dating a guy for 6 months, and then one day he no-showed her, and then he just stopped calling her, and she realized she didn't care, and she realized she was a lesbian. And now she has since gotten gay married to a woman that she clearly would notice if the woman didn't show up and never called her again, right? But why did it take all that? Because she was just content to be having, I guess, unfulfilling heterosexual sex with a guy who, if she never talked to him again, she didn't give a shit, because that's what she'd been doing. He was her boyfriend. She was his girlfriend. They went out to eat and ate Indian food and watched documentaries. And she was just sleepwalking through life on autopilot, right? And again, when he left, this is similar to your story. He left, she realized, damn, I don't even care that much. Wow. How much I was only doing that because I had been doing it. Same, most people's jobs, if you got fired, you'd say, oh my God, how will I eat? What about my health insurance? But many people's jobs, you would not say, but I was so fulfilled. Where will I find fulfillment like that again? Because the truth is, that job, you just randomly, they were looking for somebody when you were looking for something to do. It's not really as like, it's not like a great connection. So then why stay there for 20 years? Because they hired you back in 1999? That's the reason why you got to stay there now? It makes no sense. It's not how you live. Don't you admire somebody that goes like, they go like, look, think about this. Somebody who, if that boyfriend who just moved away on you, Celeste, if he just says, Celeste, I like you, but I realize I don't love you the way I want to love a wife. And I don't want to waste your time like this. And I don't want, the truth is, I want somebody who every day I feel like it's the first day. And baby, I care about you, but we're not that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to liberate us both, because I think you're amazing, but not for me. And then he left. Imagine he said that, because that's how that nigga actually rolls. You'd be like, shit, maybe I do love you, because that was ill. Did you see what I'm saying? And in the same way, you get a job, someone, and they get the evaluation. Listen, Celeste, you're really struggling here. You're right on the line of getting demoted. And you say, well, I only want to do the things I'm excellent at. So let's work out a transition plan, because I'm going to leave, because I know I bring a lot, but maybe not to here. So I'm going to find a place where what I bring is exactly what they need. And I think that'll make everybody happy. And then you did that. That's like the real shit. But to do that, you got to have the courage to have a bias towards action.
I know, that's so good. Somebody, Mimi is saying people become complacent. One thing I don't agree with what Mimi is saying is drastic things have to happen to make change. I don't agree that that's the case. I think that I like, for instance, like, why am I staying at a job for 20 years? Because I grew up thinking like I'm going to get a job and retire and this is what's going to happen. I think we become complacent in our fixations on what we think life should look like, and we never readjust to what it is. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that?
I think that it's to split the difference. I don't think what Mimi's saying is, drastic things have to happen. I don't think that they have to, but you have to be willing for drastic things to happen. You have to say, look, sometimes the answer is, at my job, we want you to do more of this. You go, I can do that. But other times they say, we want you to do more of this. You go, I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. Right? If you ask me, Jeff, can you, we want you to talk more about this, not about that. I could probably do that. Jeff, I need you to be introverted and like serious all the time. I can't work here. I can't do that. It's not my way. I'll fail. I'm good at being extroverted and, jokey and familiar. And if that doesn't work here, then I won't work here. Like, I'm not mad. I recognize I'm not the perfect fit for everything that ever existed. Someone just put, they wish everyone was that transparent. In a funny way, it's really about being transparent with yourself, right? It's really about being transparent with yourself. It's not that, oh, you owe your job that speech. It's saying like, I'm trying to have an ill-ass life. The life that at the end of it, I look back and I say, man, it was hard, but good God, every time I went for something, I always felt good about it. I know for me personally, the way I'm tuned, I never regret an action. I don't look back and say I shouldn't have stood up to that bully who whooped my ass. But I can agonize over any time, I don't know, I'm young and I let somebody check me and I didn't say shit. I'll still think about that today. I laugh about a black eye, but I'm ashamed of standing by it. One time I was out with my boys, but they were older than me. And so I'm like 13, they're 15. And a bum walked by, and one of them drop kicked, let me not say bum, but a homeless man. And one of them drop kicked the guy. And then they all they didn't really jump him. This is a weird diversion, but this is true. They didn't really jump him like where he couldn't get up, but they kind of like bullied him. Right. And then I didn't do nothing. They're all older. Each dude was bigger than me and 2 years older than me. And 13 versus 15, when you're 13, they might as well have been grown ass men. Still, I think about it with embarrassment. Should have done something for that guy. But I can think of 1,000 other times when I stood up or said something and it didn't always go right. But I feel good about having made moves. You know what I'm saying? Having made whatever move I wanted to do, not standing by and letting life happen to me. So I say that to say, quitting a job where they disrespect you, or quitting or making moves and finding a way out of a job that you realize this isn't what I want to do with my life. I don't think you'll regret that. Staying at a job for 20 years that was a C-, a D+, because you had some reason, well, I need money, as if there's not 1,000 other things to be doing. I think that's a way to regret your life.
Yeah. Yep. And what I love about the fact that you're saying that it's not about wishing everybody was transparent, being transparent with yourself. The reason why that's powerful is because when I'm transparent with myself, I'm putting the power in my hands. If I'm hoping that Jeff is transparent and says how he feels, like, I'm putting all the power in Jeff's hands. And I think that's a dangerous place to be when I'm waiting on somebody to like fulfill something where I should be able to do that within myself.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mean, if we're talking about relationships or jobs, you're going to have a hard day in relationships or jobs. It's not that when you get a job and if every day isn't the best day of your life, you leave. It's not it's not a beautiful date every time you see your mate. Sometimes you're just going to just lay around in sweatpants. Sure. I'm talking about, there's a difference between momentary fleeting happiness and contentment where you're making a difference.
Yeah.
Celeste may have good, she has breakthrough sessions and she has sessions that feel like she's banging her head on the wall. But being a therapist is fulfilling to Celeste.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Versus, I'm trying to think of maybe being an accountant wouldn't be. I don't know. Maybe you love
I would hate it. Hell no.
But accounting is important work. People need accountants. But if it doesn't fulfill you,
yeah,
then it's not going to fill you up.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it pays money, or the fact that your mother always wanted you to be an accountant, or the fact that you're already a CPA, and therefore if I change jobs, I became a CPA for nothing. If you stay here, you'll be a CPA for nothing even longer.
Yep. So true.
So you got to make bias towards action, not a bias towards what will people say or what will happen. Mimi says, I've learned to move on when I fulfilled my purpose wherever I am. Perfect, Mimi. That's just what it is. Like, if it can get to a point where you say, I used to love, Mimi got a picture with a kid's probably hers, but you like working at a daycare. Then at a certain point, you just realize, like, I used to feel so much joy coming in to see these kids. But now I don't feel the same way, and I'm ready for a change. It doesn't mean you wasted the last 5 years of your life, but if you can't be the person that gives those kids your all, bias towards action, make a change that will give you some contentment.
Yeah, I love that. And when you ask yourself the hard questions, then you can figure it out. I was listening to a podcast, and a chaplain that works at the hospital says, like, when he's sitting with people on their deathbed, a lot of people have struggled with the regret on what they would have and should have done. And I know there's been studies that when people are told they only have a certain amount of time to live, that they find themselves doing the things that they've always wanted to do. And so, like, I think it's important to really think. I mean, we know that we're not going to be here forever. So it's really important for us to really think about that as we're, like, evaluating our life, where we are. Maybe where I was at when I was 20 was fulfilling, but in my 30s, maybe it's not so fulfilling. And it's okay to make a change, but I think we don't see it often. I think people tend to look at changing careers as a failure, or even like, maybe I need to changing careers means I'm going to get a little bit less, right? And because we've put so much weight on our, like, job title or our income, right, as something that creates who I am as a person, because that's what America does. I'm going to just stay because I want to fulfill the status of what it should look like. So it's important, I think, to really evaluate that and think about, like, what fulfillment looks like for your life.
Exactly. If you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You can Google it. It's very famous part of like basically psychology. And it's like, you can think of it like a pyramid, the things that people need to function. And if they don't get whatever they get they have to get this level before they can move up to that level. So at the bottom is like safety. I don't have it perfectly memorized, but it's stuff like safety, right? Physical safety, no one's attacking me, and food and shelter. If you don't have those things, then you can't move on to the next stage, which is like, once you have those things, okay, then you can maybe move on to like relationships and so forth and so on. And then at the top, there's self-actualization. That's the pinnacle, right? Which is these kind of ideas that we're talking about, right? The self-actualization that I'm every day being and becoming the person that I want to be. Mimi says, money doesn't define you, purpose does. Purpose, when you're self-actualized, the idea is that you are somebody who has some idea of your purpose and is working towards it, versus we recognize there are people on this earth that are they're 100% focused on survival. Right? I just need somewhere to sleep tonight. I just need to worry about my next meal, my physical safety. So this does assume that you've got those things handled. But again, if you're at the point where your white collar job isn't fulfilling, find another white collar job that is, or start a summer camp if that's what you wanted to do. This is not one of those. This is not just that kind of hotep advice. Start you an LLC where you're just saying that for no. It's not that. It's like it feels so much better to be working towards something that means something to you, versus just even if they paid me $1 million to dig ditches, right? But because I don't like digging ditches, and and then all they did was fill them in behind me, but they gave me $1 million a year to do that. I'm telling you, I wouldn't do it. All I would do, at most, I would dig as few ditches as I had to get enough money to invest in myself to do the thing that I want to do. Because I want $1 million, but what I really want is to be the guy that does this stuff. Celeste doesn't pay me very much to do this show, only a few $1,000s an episode, but I still show up because this is what I enjoy doing, building with Celeste and building with the audience. I would do it for free, even though Celeste, I still demand the thousands. Thank you.
That's really good. Self-actualization. That's really good. And I think once we start to look at our priorities, like what's our priority, not what society says it should look like, not what social media says it should look like, not what our friends says it should look like, we'll actually find ourselves like living more purposefully. Most of us are living on autopilot. Like you said, most of us are living in survival mode. And I think what's made me so like self-aware and very wise around this is like my career started in the homeless population. So I know I've seen people like living in literally survival mode and having to survive. The next thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to the workplace, because what I've noticed that's been happening is a lot of people are struggling with their job's response to what's happening in the world. Do you think that corporations are supposed to respond in an intentional way to say, hey, we noticed that racism is happening. We noticed that this stuff is happening, and you may struggle? Or do you think that corporations or jobs, you're here to make money for us, and that's what it is? What's your thoughts on that? Because I've noticed that there's a lot of trauma and a lot of struggle around this idea.
Right. Well, there's a lot of data. So, of course, a company can just say, look, you're here to shovel coal into this furnace, and you shovel this goddamn coal and don't talk to me. You can do that. But let's say you're even a sociopath. Let's say you're a CEO that actually doesn't care at all about George Floyd, about Capitol insurrection, about any of that stuff. We just talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization. And if you are a corporation that has a mission and values and expresses those values and lives those values, then working for you can offer some degree of self-actualization, right? So think about like the people, just as an extreme example, people join Greenpeace, right? And either they volunteer or, get paid very little to go and fight Japanese whaling ships. The whaling ships are going to kill whales. Greenpeace feels as though whales are sentient and beautiful creatures, and they go and they fight the whaling ships. They're picking that because fighting for the lives of those whales means something to them, right? And being an environmentalist means something to them, right? People feel a calling to the church because it means something to them. So if you're a company that has something that you do, and you think you're doing good in the world, or even there's a way to do it better, like let's say, we're Tesla, the car company, and we're green because we use electricity instead of fossil fuels, and we're going to go even more green, and we're going to change the world. If you do it right as a corporation, the people who are working there can both feel like we're going to sell some cars and we're going to make this planet a better place to live. You can do that. And the companies that do that well are successful because when you offer people fulfillment, it's a lot rarer than a paycheck. Every job offers a paycheck. That's kind of what job means. But a place where you actually feel like you're making a difference and don't become cynical, disillusioned, is a place that retains employees, that gets a lot of work out of employees, that has people go the extra mile, right? I believe in this strongly because leadership, team development, mission alignment is what I do. That's what I do for a living. So trying to get teams organized around, your job, you work with youth and you're trying to get youth into college. That's what this place is about. But if the people who work there feel like we don't really succeed and this structure's messed up and we lose a lot of kids and we waste money, somehow they've lost the self-actualization that this place seems like it would have, like ripe fruit, but instead it doesn't have it. And so the goal is to get people working in such a way where they can again remember and see what it is we do this for and believe that they're making a difference.
With you, because this is kind of your craft, that you go into agencies, you kind of work with the co-worker, you work with the workers, you work with the leadership team to help like reconnect what's been broken. What do you think the common issue with the brokenness is? Because I've worked at different companies. On paper, there's no brokenness, but somehow there's some disconnect that happens. What is that disconnect with agencies that take place, you think?
Most of us would, so we the word that we oftentimes use is alignment. Most of us will recognize, you ever had a job where there's the fake job and the real job? There's what they say it is, and then there's what they really value. So I'll give you an example, right? So Best Buy is a company. I haven't worked with Best Buy. I'm just giving an example. Best Buy, they seem like they are a electronics company, don't they? They sell electronic consumer goods, right? But in actuality, Best Buy makes almost no money on electronic consumer goods. So how do they stay open? All their money is made off of insurance when they offer you the 2-year warranty, the 3-year warranty. That's where all their money comes from. You come, you buy a TV, they break even, then they sell you an insurance plan.
I had no idea.
That's what they do. Again, I haven't done leadership and mission alignment with Best Buy. That's how their company works. So when you work there, you would think that, let's say, knowing a lot about TVs would be super valuable. If you got hired there, maybe you say, well, I'm really passionate about electronics and I know all about TVs and I can tell you difference between this resolution and that one. But all they value, let's just say in my hypothetical, all they value is whoever can sell the most warranties is the best, right? So but you're presenting yourself as one thing, but you're really another thing, right? This is kind of the same thing that you were saying, Celeste, that you thought what you were doing when you were working at that place that ended up getting demoted at, right? That the nonprofit industrial complex, it says it's helping people, but it was just putting a Band-Aid, and they write grants and they'll just write a grant that says anything and then take the money and do anything else. You didn't say that. It's a common thing that nonprofits do. Or what we do doesn't really work, and what would really work we're not allowed to do, right? It's soul crushing. So alignment is figuring out the way to actually align what the company's supposed to be doing with what we do here. And you're trying to like braid it, right? To where it's living its values, where individual's job actually contributes to success. Again, if they paid me, if they one time I got hired to be a coach somewhere, then they said, well, actually we got enough coaches, so we want you to be an alternate coach. And they were like, I was like, so what would I do? They were like, basically you'll sit and wait. If any coach doesn't show up, then you'll step in and coach. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. Why don't you just pay me to sit in the car? Like, I want to feel like what I do matters. And I ended up negotiating a way to where I could contribute, because I already understand, but other people might take the deal. But as they sit and wait and aren't used, they get frustrated and cynical. And by the time it's time for them to step in and do their job, they can't do it because they hate this place. They're disgruntled. So these are the kind of interpersonal problems that come up very often.
That makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's up to, I think the ownership goes on the worker. So like the example you just gave, you could have easily just stayed in the car. And like you said, some people will be disgruntled. And I think that's what happens when we stay in positions. And even if we don't feel like they're addressing some of my personal values, what I talk to people about is like, if you don't feel this job is in alignment with your personal values, we can't change corporations. We can talk and make a request. But at some point, I had to figure out what I'm going to do, because being here is no longer satisfying. And it goes back to like me, and that gives me more power, where I'm not waiting for Jeff's organization to change the way they operate, because I can't wait for that. Life's too short for me to wait around for that.
Exactly. Well, and the truth is, so I just talked to somebody last night, a friend that I respect and admire, took a job somewhere, a high level job, like a high management job, and feels like they were sold a bill of goods, right? Feels like the place said, oh, when you come here, we'll do A, we'll do B, we'll do C, and we'll change the world. And when she got in there, first of all, we're not doing that. We're doing X, Y, Z. Second of all, they personally treat her poorly, right? Like she feels like she's to the point where she said, well, I yell at them, they yell at me. They change my they go into my calendar and change stuff. You're not going to that meeting. You're going to this one. change stuff in her calendar. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And, she's a force of nature, this person, right? Strong personality, strong values. And we did a little thought experiment. It's very simple. Imagine you're the only person on earth that can change. Okay. So whatever your plan is, the only person who's going to change is you. If they change your calendar yesterday, they're going to change it tomorrow. If they yelled at you last week, they're going to yell at you next week. But you can behave differently. What are you going to do? Because the chances are they're not going to change. But you can change. So what are you going to do? And that's how we talk through it.
That's good. And again, what Jeff is doing, he's putting the ownership back into her hands. And I think a lot of times, a lot of the way we operate, unfortunately, may stem from our trauma or some of the ways that we've learned to behave. And, some people may have a victim's lens on and may continue to keep it on. And so if my victim lens is on in her situation, I'm going to feel like I have no options. But then when I'm working with Jeff and he's like explaining to me this like idea of questioning, as simple as a question is thought provoking. And it really makes me start to look at what my power is. And I guess that's what I really want people to kind of take away from this idea as we're kind of dissecting like work environment, work relationships, because it's one of the areas that I find a lot of people are struggling in.
Right. There's something called the entitlement of victimhood, right? Mm-hmm. When you're victimhood, true victimhood comes with a lot of entitlement. And so, for example, if Celeste, I tell you, Bob killed a guy with a hammer. So far, Bob sounds like a monster. Mm-hmm. That guy touched his daughter. He touched his daughter repeatedly. Suddenly, Bob, maybe he didn't go far enough. Maybe he should have used 2 hammers, right?
Right.
Because now, once Bob's the victim, he's entitled to retribution, right?
Yeah.
And it works another way too, which is, I say, well, let's say hopefully no one says this to you, but I say, you only have such and such money. You're broke. Mm-hmm. You're broke and you're basic. Then you say, actually, if you know how far I'd come, because I was born naked and homeless and all these things. Right. Then you say, oh, actually, I thought you were a failure, but knowing where you've come from, you are a success, because that's a lot for where you started. So what people sometimes do is they cling to victimhood because it justifies their current position. So they go, well, they say, wow, your life is, you're unhappy and you're in a bad position in life. And they comfort themselves with, but it was hard for me. I'm a victim because X, I'm a victim because Y, I'm a victim because Z. Right. Therefore, don't judge me for being in this place. But the secret is let go of caring about being judged and just try to get out the place. Mm-hmm. Who cares whether there's a good reason why I'm an alcoholic who eats human feces for breakfast and lunch. Okay, that I'm not saying there is or there isn't. I don't care. Do you want this to continue or do you want to live differently? Right. It doesn't matter if you got a good reason to live in the gutter or a bad reason to live in the gutter. Do you want to live in the gutter next week? No. Then let go of the victimhood. What are you willing to change?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's what it falls down to, is like, what are you willing to change? I think the lack of commitment we have to ourselves is literally what stops us from succeeding in life. We commit to other people. We commit to being stuck. And I tell people say like, well, how do I commit to being stuck? And I said, look at what you're choosing to do. And a lot of our choices are done on autopilot. A lot of our choices are based off of the environment we were raised in. And so even though we've passed the age of 18 of becoming an adult, emotionally and our thought process, we still tend to feel like we are that child. That emotion is literally the same. And so what I always talk to people about is looking at what's happening in front of you. Does that emotion fit what's going on in front of you? Right? Because that emotion could be a pileup of a lot of things that you may not have evaluated. And unfortunately, that's what's leading the way. That's where your lens is coming from. So it's really important. The challenging of where you are is important. And so I really love that question.
Right. You're talking about transference, right? The idea that, your first boyfriend when he was quiet, that meant that he was about to fight with you later, and it would be knockdown, drag out fights, maybe not even physical, but just really brutal arguments. So then every time after that, anytime you're in a relationship with somebody and they're quiet, suddenly you start acting all anxious, and maybe you pick a fight first, or maybe you leave. This dude just wanted a little, he just gets quiet sometimes. This is not a signal of anything. But because you're transferring that relationship to all the future relationships, you repeat the same pattern and sabotage yourself.
Yeah.
And so then you'll even, some people aren't aware of that, but then they become aware, but then they just say, well, in the guy, why did you go nuts on me just because I was being quiet earlier? He says, well, my first boyfriend used to go, he would fight with me when he was quiet. So now I do that. Well, if you know that, then whose obligation is it to do something about it? If you know that, right? Is it, is the idea that it's his obligation to never be quiet? Is that the idea? Right? Or is it the idea that you should say, knowing this about myself, when my boyfriend's quiet, you say, you're quiet today. Are you mad? Or is it just like a quiet day? Right?
Yep.
So get, again, taking the onus on yourself to make moves rather than, well, that's just the way I am. If you can't accept me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. Hey, where you going? Why am I alone? Why am I sharing this meme on Facebook but lonely? Why?
And it's so true. I want to, and so like there's different type of relationships. We just spent a good amount of time talking about work. I want to like just transition into friendships, and then, like if anybody has any questions, that's fine. One of the things that, as a therapist, I get to speak to some amazing people. And so what I constantly find myself doing is challenging their mindset around their friendship. So, I grew up in Roxbury, in the hood, down the street from Crack House. And I think that my environment, where I'm at now, is not where my environment would have led me. Right. My environment did not lead me into getting my master's in mental health. It would have led me into being on the corner in Roxbury somewhere. Yep. So what happens as I, started to move forward is that my relationship started to look differently. And I think that what happened was I was challenged, like, you're changing. And I think what happens on that end is the other person is struggling with my change. Then I'm struggling because I'm like, it's me, I'm not changing. But then at some point I had to check myself and say, you actually are changing. And it's not that I'm doing anything bad. It's just that I'm just not where I was before. And what would you say to people that may be struggling in their relationships? Because I think a lot of times we hold on to relationships because we're so used to them. And sometimes we may have outgrown relationships that we need to really figure out, like, if we're going to let it go or if we're going to stay there and stay stagnant with that person. What's your thoughts on that?
Right. I think that your greatest obligation is to your own growth and betterment. And some people are in your life. I think it's biblical, right? Some people are only in your lives for a season. It's not an attack on them or something, but like, you have, you have school friends maybe, and you have neighborhood friends, and you have basketball friends, and you have club friends, right? Like, and it kind of just happens. But then if you stop going to the club, well, then your club friends kind of don't make a lot of sense. You try, well, let's transition to, we're both, I'm a mom, so why don't you come over and while we have, chill with me while we have the baby. But you hung with this person going out to the clubs. That's what they like to do. That's what united you, right? So you have to accept that. Like, okay, well, am I going to be the mother that I leave my kid at home and go to the club all the time? I'm not judging being a mother and going to the club, but you understand the idea. If we used to go clubbing 3 nights a week and now I have an infant, well, that's probably not going to happen. So you're going to have distance. And it is you who changed, but it's not wrong to start a family. So you just have to accept that what united us isn't always there. And it's not always so tangible as I had a kid. Sometimes it's just like my mindset changed. You might have gossip friends, we've all had like a work friend, but a lot of what is built around the work is talking about the other people at the job. Did you see what she wore? Did you hear when he said that? If they don't approve my vacation, I don't care. You're going to see me. You're just going to find out. I'm going to pretend I got Ebola, right? That's all you talk about. Then when you change his jobs, what united you was sharing perspectives at that job. And then when you talk to him, go, so how's everything going? You realize, damn, we didn't have nothing else. And you could have a neighborhood friend and you're united by the fact that, yeah, we're like the same type of person, right? Celeste is, whatever. She's a little 14-year-old girl on the orange line. And this woman, her 14-year-old girlfriend's on the orange line too. And it's all well and good. But like you said, the life that you wanted for yourself and built for yourself, Celeste, was not the path of least resistance where you grew up. So if other people are taking the path of least resistance, that results in them, maybe they don't finish school, maybe they get pregnant early. This is not a moral attack. I know why this happens. Celeste, you and me have lived a mile and a half apart for probably the first 20 years of our lives, right? So it's not an attack. But if I don't want to go down that path, it's like, then we won't be able to kind of keep, go together. And that's just that. So I think you have to accept it as like, I would expect that to happen, but also expect that just like you made friends in the past, you'll make friends where you're going too.
Yep. And I love the fact that you're clear on the fact that like, it's not about a moral judgment, because I always say to people that just because you're not where they are now doesn't mean there's something wrong with you or them. It's just not where you are. And one of the things that stops us from excelling is, fear, or for me, I'm just talking personally, but I know this is a lot of people's story, is I don't want them to think I'm better than them. Even when I started my private practice in 2015 and I was working with the coach around the website and stuff, he's like, why don't you have your picture on there? I said, cause it's just like the Uniting Center. It's about the practice. It's not about me. He's like, well, how are they going to know who they're going to go see if your picture's not there? And I had to really think about that. And it took me, people would never know that because I'm always online now, but it took me a while to get enough like courage and strength to go online and show my face, because all I could think of is like, what about the other people? Like, they're going to think I think I'm better than them. And I don't think that. I just really want to like talk about mental health. And so like really having the mindset around the fact that sometimes people are going to be put into categories. It's not like you have to sit there and say, hey, Jeff, you're in this category or that category. But I think that unfortunately friendships or relationships are, there's this idea, and somebody said this is what relationship means, but every relationship looks different. And I think we've allowed like the film industry to like Girlfriends or whatever the shows were, where we've seen like these like bonds happen, where we think that that's the way it's supposed to be, and it may not be that way, It's
a tough thing, I think about like, let's say like, I'm talking about Oprah a lot today, but like Oprah and Gail, right? So Oprah's, she's
you're feeling Oprah, huh?
Yeah, I'm just really talking about Oprah. But
I know. You got a little Oprah thing going on.
Sometimes at her best, she brought something to the table. But Oprah, she's abused, Black girl born in Jim Crow, Alabama, right? Grows up, becomes a newscaster, has like a failed show. She's not really killing it as a newscaster, but a few things change and she becomes a billionaire, right? And she's friends with Gail, who is a newscaster and who is, a well-off woman, but she's hanging with a billionaire named Oprah. And you wonder, like, when the check comes, does Gail fake for the check? Does she like fake, or does she really pay for it sometimes, even though she gets like a paycheck and Oprah is Oprah? Do you know what I mean? But the truth is, they must have some kind of arrangement. When I say arrangement, who knows if they talked it through, where Oprah says both like, listen, I'm still the same. I'm still Oprah in many respects, but also my life's changed a lot because I'm a world-renowned billionaire. And the truth is, they got to find a middle ground where Oprah's not apologizing for being successful, even though I'm sure Gail would also like to have had the career Oprah has had. I don't apologize for being successful, but I don't think that somehow like every way to break every argument is, well, one of us is Oprah, so shut up. You know what I mean? Like, you have to find the middle ground. You go like, I have confidence in myself and I have confidence in you. And let's instead of constantly judging and sizing each other up, let's just agree that what unites us is, our shared mutual respect. That's where you got to try to get to, but it takes two to tango, because I guarantee you Oprah has lost friends over Oprah's success.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I guarantee you that someone has, she's chilling with somebody, then they say, Oprah, do me a favor, could you buy me a house? Well, it's only $500,000. You're worth $1 billion. You can't give me $500,000. And Oprah don't like it. See, that's what happens. People blow up and they change on you, and that's why I'm, that must have happened to her.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so you got to kind of strike a balance. Miss P said, what were you gonna say?
Real quick, and the idea of when you say like how people change, and I think that people's insecurity or their expectation on what should happen, like people got to learn how to check themselves. That friend that asked for the house got to like really check themselves around their expectation around, just because like I've gotten to a certain point doesn't mean that I owe you anything, right?
Right. I have a friend. I mean, I have a friend who this is very stark for. Okay, the friend that he's from the hood. He's from our basic neighborhood. He's a Roxbury guy, and he had all the struggles you could think of, but and his family did too. But he grew up and became successful, became a businessman, got an advanced degree, and now he's doing pretty well. But most of his family did not make that transition.
Right.
And they're still lower economic status. They're still struggling. And he's in the position of that Oprah.
Right.
Even though he's nothing, like he doesn't have, he's not rich. He can't just grant their wishes. But to them, he can. Right. Because he gets to pay, he makes over $100,000 a year. Right. He gets a paycheck that they would be astonished by. But to him, he's like, yeah, like I got kids. I got, I don't have, like he doesn't have a Bentley. He's a business dude. But the point is, he has to deal with the fact that he has some survivor's guilt that he did make it out. He has to deal with the fact that they are oh, you think you're better than everyone. You so bougie. Right?
I 100% understand that. And that I think the survival's guilt is the one thing that I've struggled with the most around like, dang, I can't believe I'm here. Like I wake up in my house and even when I talk to people or I'm talking on social media, I'm always mindful. Like I say of my privilege, but nothing was handed to me. Everything was earned. But I'm still speaking from a different place. So it can be taken the wrong way by somebody who may just not know my story and just see where I'm at now. That survival's guilt thing. That is just something that happened with war veterans. It happens with people that have come from a very like hard place and have made different choices to get to where they are now.
I mean, look, if you're from, and this is true for many urban settings, Roxbury is not the worst, but Celeste, you and I are around the same age, growing up in 80s, 90s, Roxbury and Dorchester, you're gonna know multiple people that have been shot and killed and prison for life and all this stuff, and then you end up having a bourgeoisie middle class life where you have a car and kids in the house and eat every night, and like that if I look back, there was times when that could have been me. I certainly could have been. I can count. Yeah. It takes two hands for me to count all the times where I look back and go, oh yeah, I was almost murdered. Right? Like that was almost Jeff was murdered. Mm-hmm. Or, a few different decisions and you go to prison or whatever it is, even though, we all did this. I wasn't Nino Brown, but we all did enough fuck shit that you did enough where if the police had been there that day, well, then you going too. And it changed the whole trajectory of your life. So, so there's survivor's guilt from that.
Yeah.
At the same time, surviving all that let you know what, man? I also like worked hard and did a lot and was counted out a lot, and it wasn't obvious to me, and I stuck with it even when it didn't seem like there was any daylight. So there's both a merit to it and a luck to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? I recognize how fortunate I am to have made it out of that stuff, and I recognize that a lot of times when I thought about giving up, I've had people say to me, why don't you give up? Why would you say that to me? But I've heard it. but I didn't give up. And I look at that and I go, you know what? That's the merit. That's why I'm proud of myself, even though I also recognize I'm very fortunate.
Yeah. And so for people that may be understanding this whole survival's guilt thing or feeling like they relate to it, what Jeff is saying, literally, that's what you have to do. Literally, that's what I do. Like I make that, I'm mindful of that, but then I make that observation about what I've done. And that really like helps alleviate. I laugh. I just think about, I'm just going to tell this quick story. Answer Miss P. Love's question and we're going to go. When I was dating someone, they had, it was a big crack. It was a big rock of crack. And I remember they was like, oh, just put this in your glove compartment, right? Just put it in your glove compartment and like drop them off. And I'm driving around with so much drugs on me. And every time I think back about that situation, and that person's like literally in jail right now. And every time I think about that time and I hear people's stories, I literally would have been pulled over. I literally went the therapist, but I was so naive and so like gullible that I never thought about the consequences. So I always want people to know when I speak about these things, I'm not speaking from somebody that just like came from a silver spoon and have this degree. I'm really speaking to somebody that completely understands how mindless we can be about things and how we operate on autopilot and how our environment has really like shaped our decisions. But then I really want people to see like the power that they have to really make better choices in life. And I don't think people understand that.
Right. When you're in your environment, if he'd have showed up with a chicken under his arm, like a live chicken, you'd have been like, what? No, because there's no chickens in Roxbury. But he showed up with crack and you felt like he ain't the only person who sold crack that you knew. So even though you yourself wasn't like, a gangster, but you said, well, I mean, sometimes niggas got crack. Like it feels like, well, sometimes, like
a chicken wouldn't have got me locked up, but I wouldn't have had a live chicken in my car.
Exactly. My boy told a story the other day real quick. He said that, he went to go get Chinese food in Grove Hall. And then right when he pulled up, a dude got shot and murdered there. So he just drove off. You see someone get shot, he just drove off. They drove for 5 minutes, then they realized, damn, that Chinese food really is bomb though. And they went back and they got Chinese food there. They just waited 5 minutes and went back because it's not that weird.
It's not.
Someone gets shot is not that weird. And I didn't do that, but I done similar things where I go like, that really should have been a bigger deal. But you just feel like,
absolutely. I was leaving to go to the club and I heard some shots. I was on Blue Hill Ave in Dorchester and I always think about this and think about how desensitized I was about things. And I said, let me hurry up before they tape off my car. I didn't want to get taped in. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I need to get there before 11 so I can get in free. But I just heard some shots. It's not like, oh my gosh, like, am I safe? It's like, no, I need to move my car because once the police come, they're going to tape in my car. Like, that's how like desensitized we can get around this stuff. It's so sad.
I was out. When I was a teenager, me and my brother, my boy who's passed away now, my other boy who's kind of disappeared, kind of in the wind. We were walking from the Lee School I lived in Upham's Corner, so we're walking down Blue Hill Ave to Columbia Road. We're walking, dude rolls up on a bike, pulls a gun. We have an exchange, right? He puts the gun to my, he kind of put it to my, like, my Johnson. What a weird, put it to my head, please. But it pulls the gun out, whatever. And then after he left, we just kept walking. Like, damn, that was crazy. Like, we weren't neutral on that. We just kept walking. I didn't call I'm like 16. I didn't tell my parents. I went to my house and then we said, you know what? Let's go back out and play ball. And we did. We went and played midnight basketball.
That's literally how you can get so used to trauma. Somebody else that may have grew up in the suburbs would think like they would probably be in the hospital after that incident, Right?
And you just always know, like, I mean, dudes got guns, man. What you gonna do? Like sometimes, shit gonna happen. But it's not. You shouldn't be used to it, but you
shouldn't be. No, we shouldn't be. All right, we're going to answer Miss P. Love's question. And Jeff will be back next month twice. And remember, like, if you enjoy the episode and you want your relationship question answered, you see today we're talking about work, friendship, We're talking about environment, any type of relationship. We'll answer those questions. But Ms. P. Love says, would you consider a friendship over if the other person doesn't consistently communicate with you? She says, when you reach out to them, they rarely respond back. And when they do, there is always some excuse for their inconsistent communication. Do you want to go at this? This is easy for me.
Well, I mean, do I consider it over? I wouldn't be that final about it, but there's a point where it's a hint, right? So you call somebody once, they don't call you back. You call them twice. It's not like you keep it a perfect black book of, I called you 3 times and you only called me twice. It's not that. But you know when people are breaking the pattern, right? We used to talk every week, and now you haven't called me for 3 weeks. And they go, I've been busy. Then they still don't call. You know what I mean? You know when you get into that, to where you go, okay, well, I'll accept this kind of new. You could feel free to be like, I feel like you've been distant lately. Is there anything you want to say? But there's a good chance that they'll just be like, what? What? Me? What? No. Hey, let me call you back. And if they do that and don't call you back, then you kind of take the hint. You got to roll that way. And later on, if they resurface, you can pick and choose whether to re-engage. For me, if I were to re-engage, I might say, hey, I noticed you had acted mad distant. Then when I asked you about it, you said it was nothing. Then you disappeared for 8 months. And now you're calling me as if none of that happened. So can I get some clarity? And if they still act like I don't know what you're talking about, I find it hard to imagine that I'll let things go back to the way they were. Because I'm going to basically move how you move.
What I love about Jeff's response is that you're asking the hard question. I think this scenario that Miss P. Love is literally, I hear this stuff all the time, and I'm trying to get people to kind of look at it from the other person's perspective. Like, we are literally in the middle of a panoramic, right? And I think that a lot of people are going through some things, and it has changed the dynamic of their relationships. And unfortunately, people are taking it personal, even if we're not in the panoramic. I keep freaking pandemic. Even if we're not in the middle of a pandemic, I think that something could be going on with the person. And remember, our lens on life, what we talked about earlier, if I'm a victim and the moment you don't do something or you don't respond, I start making that calculation. So I don't see the times you respond. I don't see the times that you are reaching out to me. I'm only looking at the times you don't reach out to me, because that's the way my brain is kind of working. And I think it's important for us to be clear with that relationship, that friendship with the person in its infancy. Don't let it go months by where it's just like, oh, they're not calling me. Then you start calculating and you start creating your own narrative. Being alone in your thoughts can become very dangerous when you're just utilizing your own mindset around it and not understanding what's happening. You'll be surprised. A lot of people on the other end, it may not be intentional, and sometimes it could be. Sometimes they're just jealous of you in a relationship, or they jealous that you got that new job, right? That could be the case, but you'll never know if you don't really look out, reach out to like kind of ask the hard questions,
That bet the same dude that we went and played midnight basketball after the gun, that same dude, sometimes he was one of the best friends of my life, and I loved him. However, sometimes you would say something or do something, or you get something in his head and would kind of like grow distant for 6, 8 months, even a year before, right? And the one thing, and now he's dead, right? He died. And so, he was my best friend, and now he's dead. However, I hated that we had those breaks in our friendship. But the one thing I liked, this is before I knew about radical candor and solution focus and was a coach. When that happened, I reached out and I said, I said, hey, you're not calling, or you're not answering, or what's going on? He didn't say it. He didn't. He did basically the toxic thing, which is to just not answer and not say nothing and ghost you. But I only say that to say that had I instead been like, 2 can play that game or whatever it is, I would feel so much worse now. But instead, I moved with the maximum integrity in that case, which was I tried to address it openly. If he don't want to, he don't have to. And then after that, it is what it is. But I didn't do that. I didn't pull that move where you go, well, I noticed you wasn't calling me. So then when you called me, I didn't answer. Like, ugh.
Right.
Ugh.
Right. That's what happens. And because of that, you're able to have like peace that you've tried everything that you possibly can. And I don't think most of us do that. So thank you for sharing that. That was like a really good example. So this was great. If you've never been on with Jeff, if you're listening to this on the audio, there are numerous episodes with Jeff that you can find. It's been going. So I just want to say, Miss P Love says it's been going on for a while, 1 year and a half. She says she's been going through a lot. We've known each other for over 15 years. So I'll just leave it with this. It sounds like you have addressed it. She is going through a lot. And so this is one of those situations where she's in a different position than you are. Unfortunately, you're internalizing her response when it sounds like she's clear with you that she's going through a lot. And so you just have to meet her where she is. And if you're not willing to meet her where she is, you have a choice not to be there. You don't have to allow a negative thought process to go on in your head. You either choose to be there and wait it out until she is like able to get through some of the things, and maybe you guys can go back to the way things were, or you can leave. I think a lot of times people feel stuck, whether it's a relationship or a situation. I truly believe we're never stuck. There's options, but we struggle with seeing those options because our emotions like get in the way.
Yeah, in the end, it hurts because you think, but I've been your friend for 15 years. I want to be a resource for you. But she gets to pick her resources. So if she don't want to use you as a resource on this, and whatever her issue is, she doesn't want to share it with you and puts distance between you. It does. I'm not saying that shouldn't hurt.
It's gonna hurt.
I see why it hurts. I see why it hurts, because it feels like rejection, and it is a rejection of something you're offering, which is closeness in this trying time.
Yes.
I'm offering closeness in this trying time, and she's saying no closeness, and it's like, well, damn, what's wrong with me? I wouldn't take it like that, because who knows what she's going through, whatever. I would just, when I say respect it, I mean, if she says I'm going through a lot and basically don't want to hang out right now, I would respect it, like, then that's what it will be. But I want to validate your feelings and say, I understand if this doesn't feel great. It's not, we're talking about it matter-of-factly, but it doesn't feel great in the moment. And when my boy he ghosted me like that, whatever, I had to both say to myself, damn, this really hurts. And when you're young, you really rock with your friends.
Hard body.
So I'm like, damn, this really hurts. But it's like, all right, well, how many times you gonna call him and his sister say he's not home, and he don't go nowhere.
Right.
So then you just, all right, well, it is what it is.
And I'll say, Miss Love, just from my own personal experience, and I think being where I'm at, I felt that loneliness when people choose not to speak to me, and it's not because of anything I did. I recognize it's a lot of people just feel insecure around me, not because I make people feel insecure. I think that sometimes when people aren't doing everything in their own life that maybe they aspire to be, it may be hard. And if I am saying I'm going to work out and I follow somebody that works out, I don't want to look at their page for the day, because it's going to make me feel a certain way. And I recognize that. And so for me, there's a lot of people that were in my life that are not in my life. And I'm not going to sit here and say oh, well, I've just outgrown them and there's no feelings. There's feelings I've struggled with around it, but I can't internalize it and make it like something I did wrong. It's more, I look at it more as there's something that they're struggling with, and I have to accept that. And I have to move on. I cannot keep trying to drag them and say oh, but it's still me. I'm still here, when they have their own personal issues that they have going on.
Right. Like one thing that popped to my head, I know nothing about your life, Ms. P, but the idea that let's say your friend is struggling to conceive. She always wanted to have a child and she's trying, but she can't get pregnant. And then you have 3 kids, right? And one of them, is young. And so you're living her dream life.
Yeah.
And she can't share that with you, that she sometimes resents you or resent your kids, or she would feel funny, or just the sight of you saying, hold on, I got to put the kids to bed. And then she looks over and all she's got is a negative pregnancy test.
Right.
And she finds it unbearable. I'm making this up, but just to say that's an example where I could understand why she would put distance. and you'd be hurt, but there's nothing you could do. It's not like you could just be different. Your existence is agony to her.
Yes.
And that can happen.
That's such a good example. That's so good. And I think that it's important just for us to just kind of think outside the box when it comes to these relationships, friendships, because I think they change so drastically, and it causes people a lot of turmoil. But it's important to grieve the loss of the life that, we thought was going to be, and then accept where we are. So good. Miss P Love says, I understand. I did feel like I did something wrong, but now she's looking at it differently. That makes me so happy.
Or your friend could just be a monster. Who knows? Whatever it is, we don't know until she shares. We'll never know.
Exactly. Yeah. So this was good. So people listening, we talk about our relationships, not just romantic relationships. I figured the work stuff was going to take us in deep. So definitely send your questions. You can go to my website, celestetherapist.com, and send your questions anonymously. You don't have the dates off the top of your head, right? No,
not at all. I don't know when.
All right, of course not. No, but we'll be back twice next month, and I'll make sure to put it on the website so that we can talk to the executive coach. But if you guys so Jeff did a birthday thing. I mean, he doesn't do it regularly. I don't know if I should say it. Go ahead. So Jeff did I had a surprise party for my husband online. It was a hella black trivia. It was dope. And if you like Jeff, he actually does this where you can join online for free on Tuesdays once a month.
Every third Tuesday of the month, we do hella black trivia online. You can join for free, right? That's my little side gig. Just do it for the people, So we did hella black trivia for Celeste's husband's birthday. He was very surprised. Celeste is the worst liar. So she starts the Zoom, right? But he doesn't know yet. And she looks so guilty. If you was cheating on him, you would have got caught, because that was terrible. She was looking all guilty, like, I'm not doing anything, Jonathan. Please don't come over here. Like, yo, this is terrible.
He does not like the spotlight. He is the opposite from Celeste. Everything that I do, he is just the opposite. But they had so much fun with the hella black trivia. And Jeff's commentary is just this is Jeff. But if you enjoy Jeff and you want to join a trivia game, actually tell people what the trivia is so that they can understand
hella
what
black
it
trivia.
is.
Some hella black trivia, what we call it is trivia with seasoning, right? It's trivia with the black diaspora in mind. So instead of asking about Golden Girls, we're more likely to ask about living single. Instead of asking about Guns N' Roses, we're more likely to ask about Drake. Not that Drake ain't so okay, Meek Mill.
Instead of asking about mayonnaise, they might ask about Adobe seasoning.
Exactly. Adobe. Exactly. So we had questions for Celeste. We had questions about for her husband. We had questions about Haiti and the various things that what our people's about. And so what people oftentimes, Black and brown people will say, oh, I don't like trivia. I'm not good at trivia. I've encountered that many times. And then we do trivia and they find out, oh, damn, I love trivia. I just never realized this whole time I was doing hella white trivia.
And so for my white listeners, are they invited to the hella black trivia?
You are. And you're gonna, and I hope you've seen New Jack City before. And I hope, I hope you like your steak well done.
Thank you. This was amazing. I appreciate you. We'll see you next month, thankfully. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye. So that's a wrap. That was Jeff. Let's talk about relationships. That's what we do. We talk about relationships. If you enjoyed the episode, you can find it on all podcasting platforms tonight. You can also find other episodes from us where we kind of go in on relationships, and there's probably about 5 or 6, but twice a month he comes on and we kind of answer questions. Today I really wanted to kind of focus on the workplace and friendships, because it's been a common theme for people. So one thing about me is that I have like, I understand the issue because of what I do. So there's a lot of common themes that have happened that I really wanted to address because I'm sure other people are like struggling with it. So I'll be back Monday. We'll be talking, it'll be February, right? Yeah, it'll be February. I'll be back Monday. We'll be talking to somebody else that's doing something to empower the lives of others. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you later.
Smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity, and make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life goes